they have a good tight end, and you don't need two-star tight ends to be successful on offense in this league.
Johnny Mac, how was your weekend? How are we doing tonight?
Spectacular. Doing well. How are you, Ron?
Spectacular. Wow. I mean, was there anything that caused it to be spectacular, or are you just over-exaggerating for us?
Well, I'm over-exaggerating. I just heard Ric Flair's music, so I got to sell. The greatest seller of all time, I got to sell.
There you go. I love it. Yeah, Ric Flair will do that to you. All right, so Friday night, I think you and I had a good conversation, just to pat ourselves on the back, talking about the Eagles' wide receivers and the wide receiving corps. I say that intentionally. But tonight we're going to...
By the way, that guy got it wrong. I don't think he knows he got it wrong, but he got it wrong.
Yeah, it was still funny nonetheless. Yeah, but now tonight, my plan with you, John, is to focus on the tight end position because we've talked plenty Zach Ertz, and we know what's coming there. And there's some speculation about potentially drafting a tight end. So I'll let you just kind of lay the foundation here. Give us an update on the tight end position. You can talk to us about Zach Ertz, updates there, Dallas Goedert, and we'll get into everything from there.
Yeah, kind of a demarcation line for this team at the tight end position because they're going to move on from Zach Ertz. It's just a matter of when and if they're able to get anything back or if they have to release them. That ship has kind of sailed for anything from more Zach's perspective. He doesn't want to be back with this organization. So that, unfortunately, is going to end on a bad note. Great career. Little disappointing, I think, from Zach's perspective in that it looked like he'd leave this. He'd certainly be the all-time leading receiver in this organization. If he had a typical Zach Ertz year, he would have easily surpassed Harold Carmichael, but that didn't happen. We all know it was a career worst year, and it's time to turn the page and look towards Dallas Goedert as being the sort of crux of that position. And I think, it's interesting because we don't know about the new coaching staff. We don't know fully what they want to do. You can look at Indianapolis. You could look at Nick Sirianni's history. You could look at Shane Steichen with the Chargers and kind of make some broad thoughts about what offense they're going to run. But until you see it, you don't know. It's just kind of a league-wide thing that you want more receivers on the field. You want to spread the field more. And, hey, the old Eagles coaching staff wanted to do that. Problem is they couldn't do it because the receivers weren't good. The tight ends were good. Now I think they want to turn the page. They want to get more receivers on the field. So you don't need two great tight ends, so to speak.
You read my mind. That's where I was going next with you is, we're used to Doug Peterson and that philosophy, which, we knew that they liked having two tight ends, Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. That's why they brought in Goedert, at least one of the reasons. But can we make any prediction or thoughts on what Nick Sirianni prefers? Is he good with just really focusing on having one tight end majority of the time, and Dallas Goedert is that guy? Or does it make sense to bring in someone else, whether that's through the draft, free agency, or trade, that can also be an impact right away?
Well, either way, you need two competent tight ends generally to run an NFL offense. And if you look at Indianapolis, by the way, they had good tight ends. Maybe not as good as the Eagles were with Zach when Zach was playing well and Dallas Goedert. But I think the goal is sort of, 66%, three receivers, 33%, two tight ends. And then from the Eagles' perspective, over the past number of years, it's been more two tight ends than three receivers. And, you could look at it two ways. You could look at it the fact that Doug Peterson realized what he had and moved the needle in that direction, and that was a good thing. But behind the scenes, I can tell you, I mean, Doug's default offense was 11 personnel, and that's 3 receivers. That's what he wanted on the field. The Eagles could never find 3 receivers good enough to keep them on the field that were better than the tight ends. So ultimately, that's the goal. Can you get there? And by the way, you don't want to get there necessarily by taking away from a strength of one position and saying, let's get worse there so we can get 3 receivers on the field. You want 3 good receivers. But circumstance, prevents this team from probably moving forward with Zach Ertz and seeing if he can have a bounce-back year because, again, he just doesn't want to be here. So it's similar to Carson Wentz in a lot of ways, and you kind of have to move on. So at that point, who's going to be your second tight end? And, Richard Rodgers is a free agent. He played great last season. I think nobody expected it, but when the injuries cropped up, he played really, really well. They do have a lot of young players. Caleb Wilson is around. Hakeem Butler they still have. They signed Tyree Jackson, who's a former quarterback in college at Buffalo, so they're trying to go the Logan Thomas route and see if he can make that switch and become a player. But then, the elephant in the room, I guess, is Kyle Pitts, and a lot of people are trending in that direction at the top of the draft. But I got to tell you, I just don't see it, Ryan.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Now, if I'm the general manager of an NFL team, and I've never been anywhere close to that, but I'm looking at my depth chart, and if I have this Eagles team, I'm saying, okay, we need a lot of work at wide receiver. We have Dallas Goedert, who is more than serviceable. Many think he can be elite if you give him the reps and the time on the field. So why the heck would they even consider going Kyle Pitts and skipping over an opportunity to address a position of more need?
Well, the theory is, when you're up at that point of the draft, you take the best player. And there's a lot of people that think Kyle is amongst the best 2 or 3 players in this draft. So from that perspective, you say, okay, you just take the best player and figure it out from there. And that's a good problem to have. And if you have to go back to 2 tight ends, you got to go back to a lot of 2 tight ends because they're better than your receivers. Same thing that Doug Peterson went through. But while I say that, there's good receivers in this draft, as we know. And there's positions at the top of this draft the Eagles value far more. And Pitts is such an interesting player because you sort of have 2 camps. You have the one camp who says he's a weapon. He's not a typical tight end. He's a glorified, just a king-size slot receiver because there's some blocking deficiencies. And then you have the other camp that says, actually, for a modern tight end, remember there's no more inline Y-backs, Mark Bavaro. Those players don't exist anymore. And the old adage in tight end rooms across the NFL is lose, but lose slowly when you're blocking because you're going to lose. Just do it slowly. In other words, work your butt off and just try to do the best way possible, slow down the edge rushers. And Pitts is a willing blocker. He's always proven to be and stick his nose in there. He doesn't have a problem with it. And that's half the battle. But then, if you're saying he's just a traditional tight end, well, there's just, you can bring in whatever tight end you like. Travis Kelce, George Kittle are the best tight ends in football. You can just look at the NFL draft over the years. That's not a position, number 6 overall, where you take a tight end. It's just not. The value is just not there.
Yeah, it's just doesn't really make sense. And I don't want to go back to quarterback talk here with you, but I will just say this as it relates to the Eagles building around that position. Doesn't it matter the direction of that position? Like, we feel like Pitts will fit best with Jalen Hurts, or we feel like, et cetera. Let's get the wide receiver because we don't know what's going to exactly happen under center. You get the picture I'm trying to paint.
Yeah, well, and a lot of people are going to draw, the lines to Brian Johnson, the new quarterbacks coach, and his history with Jalen Hurts, and obviously he coached Kyle Pitts in Florida. So if you want to bend over backwards and try to, try to read those tea leaves and play, the Kevin Bacon game and all that kind of stuff, I mean, you can do it. You can always do that stuff. But coaches in this league have to, doesn't matter. I remember, back when Pete Carroll, way back, when he took Earl Thomas, who was going to be a Hall of Fame safety, turned out to be a Hall of Fame safety. Obviously, nobody knew at the time. But that was big in Philadelphia because everybody for years said, why didn't you take Earl Thomas? And, he was on the board when Brandon Graham was there and Jason Pierre-Paul. You know that story. But Taylor Mays was coming out of Southern California, and he was a great college safety. And Pete Carroll coached him at USC, and everybody was making that correlation. Oh, he's going to take Taylor Mays. No, he took the better player, and he made the right decision. And that's what you have to do. And obviously, Brian Johnson's just a position coach. It's not apples out. He doesn't have that kind of power anyway. But the point I'm trying to make is that those things don't really matter, and coaches understand. You can't just pick people you used to coach, you used to be with, you used to do. You have to pick the best players, and everybody kind of understands it. Yeah, I mean, I got a kick out of it today because over the weekend on extending the play, I'd mentioned to you that Mac Jones is going to be taken a lot sooner than people expect in the draft. And now all of a sudden it starts to come out, and there's a big mock draft today that has him going 6 overall, and all the Eagles fans are losing their mind. But, yeah, everything starts with the quarterback position, and you have to make that decision first and foremost. And that's the most difficult decision, and every other decision the Eagles have to make kind of falls after that one. I mean, let's be honest.
All right, so if the Eagles don't take Kyle Pitts, hypothetically, at number 6, what are some names that are available further down the board, whether that's second round, third round, or we can go even further down if anything stands out to you? And then just to tease it for everyone, I also want to get into tight ends that could be available in free agency.
Well, I would say, I mean, this team has plenty of bodies at the position, plenty of young sort of talent. I mentioned, Tyree Jackson's a guy that went out specifically and got under a futures contract. He played quarterback at Buffalo, University of Buffalo. And I mentioned Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas, for people who don't remember, was quarterback at Virginia Tech and slowly shifted. He was so oversized and so big. And he was a really good quarterback in college, and so was Tyree. And you can see what they're trying to do and the way that the position is going as a whole. And it's more receiving based, obviously, as we know. We kind of talked with Pitts. And they also have Hakeem Butler. Anybody who remembers him in college he was an oversized receiver. And they're trying to shift him into a flex tight end. And they did it for years. Josh Perkins is now a free agent. And he's had too many injuries. But he was a receiver. He was an oversized receiver in college at Washington when he started out. So you can see what the Eagles are trying to do. So to me, this is not a need position, even though you're losing Zach Ertz because Dallas Goedert, if he's healthy, if he's out there, that's a top 10 tight end in this league. You could probably get Richard Rodgers when you talk about free agency. You could probably get him under a pretty cost-effective deal because the Eagles have been able to utilize him better than anybody else. Remember, he went down to Washington. It didn't work out. He came back here. So when you look at this team and how they're going to move forward, I don't necessarily think they need to look at bringing in new bodies because they have plenty of developmental players, and they're trying to sort of carpet bomb the position with a certain type and try to get that flex receiver. And ultimately, if you have Goedert and you bring back Richard Rodgers, that's better than most tight end groups in this league. So I don't think it's a terrific need, even without Zach Ertz. I really don't.
This is a name that I saw that, piqued my interest, may be dramatic, but Trey Burton, thoughts about that name?
Yeah, it's interesting. Trey he writes every once in a while for this online publication. You know, he's more of a Christian faith type thing. He's very into his faith, was very close to Carson Wentz when he was here, and Zach. They were all good friends. Jordan Matthews was in that group as well. And he had mentioned today, because he's a free agent, as you mentioned, and he lives in the Tampa area, which, you know, everybody wants to play in Tampa now for a number of good reasons, but starting with Tom Brady. And he said, if I'm going away from Tampa, he's got to leave his family in Tampa. He's got 3 young kids. And he doesn't necessarily want to go long distances. He doesn't necessarily want to do that. And he's also talked about he's not going to play football for a tremendous amount of time because of his faith, and he thinks other things are more important. So I understand why people want to make that correlation because of Philly Special and all that stuff, but I don't think Trey would want to come back to Philadelphia. I think he wants to play closer to home, probably at home. And obviously Tampa Bay is not necessarily in need of a tight end, so that's going to be difficult for him. But I just don't see it as a fit.
Talking with John McMullen, our NFL Eagles insider. All right, so I think the point that was brought up about this new coaching staff, and we're not really sure exactly what is preferred as far as game plan, scheme, the amount of tight ends they want to use, the wide receivers, everything, running backs out of the backfield as far as the passing game is concerned. So let's assume for a second, John, that Jalen Hurts is the starting quarterback, and piece this together as best we can as far as what's the ideal weaponry for him as the official starter moving forward under Nick Sirianni. So is it dynamic wide receiver on the outside? Of course, any quarterback would love that, but tight ends in the middle. How do you see him really thriving this immediate season?
Well, I do think with a young quarterback, you do want a good pass-catching tight end as sort of a security blanket, and I think Dallas Goedert could be that guy. And I mentioned I do think people don't realize how well Richard Rodgers played, and he's got good hands. He's not nearly as athletic, so it's I'm not trying to oversell it and say he could be a star tight end, but he would be very effective as a number 2 tight end. But one thing Nick Sirianni has said is very similar to what Doug Peterson ended up doing, and that's that he's not married to a certain scheme or certain personnel base, and the fact that he'll look at the talent he has on hand and he'll play the best players. And that's sort of where Doug defaulted to. I think everyone says, oh, Doug wanted to play two tight ends. I'm telling you, he did not. He didn't like it at all. He wanted to play more 3 wide receivers. He didn't have the personnel to do it. So he shifted, and he shifted every year. Every year they would come back and say, we want to play less two tight ends, and they just couldn't do it because they couldn't find receivers. So, yeah, I think it's far more important for this team to finally fix the receiver position, which we talked about last week and I wrote about today at phillyvoice.com. It's, they need more than anything else for Jalen Hurts. They need a true number one receiver. And come hell or high water, they got to figure out how to get it. And it might come at number 6 overall. It might come at 37, whether it's, I've mentioned Kadarius Toney and Rashad Bateman. I mean, there are good receivers, but it doesn't stop at the draft. You have to develop those receivers. The Eagles have done a poor job. They have a new coaching staff. Maybe that changes. But they have a good tight end. And you don't need 2-star tight ends to be successful on offense in this league. You do need multiple receivers that can do things down the field. And if they get a true number one, it will make things easier. The dominoes will fall. It will make things easier for the Jalen Reagors of the world and everybody else.
While we're on the tight end position here for the Eagles, is there any update, speculation, rumors regarding where Ertz could end up here, John?
The Chargers were the latest to check in on his availability. Seattle's interesting, too, because they've checked in on Zach, but they're kind of in flux now with everything going on with Russell Wilson. Obviously, they're more hampered from a salary cap perspective as well. If you go back to the trade deadline last year, with Zach's injury, it kind of derailed things. Green Bay was looking at him. Baltimore was looking at him. People have speculated in Indianapolis because of Frank, and now Carson's there. But they have good tight ends. They got Mo Alley Cox and Jack Doyle, and they have good tight ends. So I'm not necessarily. I don't think that's the natural fit that people think it is. But if I were to guess, I would say the Chargers are the most likely to trade for Zach. And the Eagles might end up. I think people don't realize he's not going to have a lot of value because of his contract, because of his age, because of his injury plague season, because he didn't play well. They might be forced to release him when it's all said and done.
Wow, that would be that'd be surprising to me, at least. One other rumor I read about was the Bengals trading for Ertz to have that connection with Joe Burrow and Zach Ertz.
Yeah, I mean, look, it would make sense. As I just said, with a young quarterback, you want that security blanket. And Zach Ertz, we all saw him he had that span where, obviously, he had the record-setting season where he caught, I think, 116 receptions, which was an NFL record for tight ends. His low water mark over a 5 or 6 year period was 74 receptions. I mean, that's how productive this guy was each and every year. So for a young quarterback, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, anybody, that kind of tight end is invaluable. In a lot of ways, if the Eagles' relationship wasn't fractured, I would advocate for trying to bring Zach Ertz back. He's under contract anyway. You might as well try it. But I think it's more the relationship and the fact that he doesn't want to be here. He's very angry at the organization than it is just from a pure football performance perspective, because I think he could be very, very helpful to Jalen Hurts.
Talking with John McMullen, our NFL Eagles insider. Follow him on Twitter at JFMcMullen. PhillyVoice.com and SI.com is where you can find all of John's written work, host of Extending the Play every Saturday at 10 a.m. John, tomorrow I want to talk about the running back position with you. And we're going to wrap up this conversation with just a couple of the latest rumors and news and notes. I saw something with Marcus Mariota today from The Athletic, and they were saying the Eagles could be interested and they could be using a dual quarterback. Just your quick thoughts there.
Well, they're not trading for Marcus Mariota. I mean, he's got a contract which is pretty unbelievable for a backup quarterback. It's $10.65 million. He's under contract for plus escalators. So if he plays, he gets significantly more money than that. So in essence, if he's the starting quarterback, you're tacking on another $4, $5, $6 million on top of that. So that's now for a starting quarterback. If you think about $16 million, which would be the high point, that's not bad. But it is bad for a team that obviously has some significant salary cap issues, and it would be signaling this is our starting quarterback. So if you're saying dual, there's no Marcus Mariota versus Jalen Hurts. I mean, if you're paying a guy that much money, he's going to be your starting quarterback. And what has Marcus Mariota done over 6 seasons in his career to make you think he's going to be a competent starting quarterback? I think you're giving up. You're raising the white flag and say, okay, we might not be able to get a quarterback this year, but we'll be in the top 5 next year, and we'll get a quarterback next year. And why would you do that? That's not how the Eagles do business. And it's way too early in the process. But if you talk to NFL people, the quarterbacks next year aren't as good as the quarterbacks this year. It doesn't make any sense on any level. None. I mean, if you're going out to get Marcus Mariota, just let Jalen Hurts play.
Right.
I mean, one guy stinks, and the other guy, well, maybe he stinks, but we don't know yet.
Yeah, at least get confirmation on the stinkage before you, don't even give him a chance.
Maybe I'm being a little too harsh on Marcus Mariota, but I mean, why not look at Mitch Trubisky? You could probably get him cheaper.
Oh, boy. Okay. So last one here for you, John, before I let you go. J.J. Watt, just your thoughts on him ending up in Arizona.
Yeah, a little bit of a surprise. Got to give, obviously, DeAndre Hopkins credit, a little recruiting credit. Vance Joseph as well, because he was in Houston. So J.J. knows him very well. But I think, when he left Houston, I think everybody speculated on Pittsburgh because of his brothers, Buffalo because they're so close, Cleveland maybe because they were a playoff team, Green Bay because he's a Wisconsin guy. So this is a big get for Arizona, and we'll see. I mean, look, Chandler Jones was injured for much of last season. That's one of the great pass rushers in this league. So they'll be getting him back, and you have J.J. Watt. Now, there's some age concern. Obviously, J.J.'s not what he once was, but on paper, that looks like a pretty good pairing. So Arizona's starting to make a run, and we'll see. I mean, Kyler Murray got to be a little bit more consistent. You're always concerned because he was playing great. Then he banged up his shoulder, and he just wasn't the same. And the way he plays and his body type and how small he is, I'm just concerned if he's able to stay healthy long term. But certainly Arizona's going to be excited. It's a big name. You know how fan bases are. They're not getting the 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, though, but he's still a good player.
Exactly. It's a big name on a team with a young quarterback and young head coach, and should be an interesting story to follow, obviously, throughout the NFL season. Follow John McMullen on Twitter at JFMcMullen. We do this every night at 7:30, and tomorrow night here on The Fix, John's going to fill us in on the running back position for the Philadelphia Eagles. Sound good, John?
Yeah, that's always controversial because shocking to everyone. But Miles Sanders is not Walter Payton. I always get in trouble when I say that.
That's breaking news, all right? So Miles Sanders.
The fan base thinks he is.
I know they do, and that's the problem. We'll talk about it tomorrow. All right, John, thanks, man.
All right, thanks, Ron.
Yep. All right, there he is, Johnny Mack. Dropping knowledge, yo.
The middle.
I'm out on fishing in areas like...
Come on, bro. You're about to have a kid, and he's going to want to go fishing. Uncle B can't take him fishing all the time. You got to learn to fish, bro.
It's a good point.
What do you mean it's a good point? My ability to father my child relies solely on taking him fishing?
Yes, Mr. Predicto.
All right, what's the question for Mr. Predicto here?
About your ability to father a child.
Well, it has to be yes or no, okay?
Will your son want to go fishing?
Well, my son, my boy, want to fish.
The signs say no.
Huh?
Oh!
That's it. I'm walking off the set like Maury. Boom, boom. I'm out.
Drop the mic.
See ya.
You're not capable of dropping the mic.
Oh, my goodness.
I'll roll with that Mr. Predict. This is my guy right here.
The Middle with Eitan Shander, Barrett Brooks, and Harry Mays. Weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern.